Hi, my name is Justin DeWin with Atomic Object. I'm going to be demonstrating to you a unit testing framework that we've developed for Intersystems Caché and Ensemble. It has a lot of neat things for testing production specifically. So today we have a production that is fully tested, and for this example we're going to assume that we've just imported this production into a new instance of Ensemble, and we're going to run all of our tests to make sure that everything is as we expect it to be. So let's set up our test suite here, and it looks like we already have it here. And this test suite will run all the test cases in a given package. So if we go look at our test suite, it'll run all the tests under ensemble.tests. And we can see that we have four of them. So let's go run our tests by hitting F5. And our tests are off. And it's running our routing test to make sure that our messages are going where we expect them to, and it looks like we have some failures doing that. We'll look at those shortly. Next is our production test, which is really a full system test. It sends a message directly to the inbound service and verifies the path that it takes throughout the production. And it looks like we have some failures here. It looks like the messages aren't making it to the router, and here it looks like we can't even send a message to our inbound service, and we'll look at that after all the tests have run. Okay, and our settings tests have failed, and our setting test is what verifies settings for our configuration items on our production. So rather than looking through our output console, let's copy this link and look at it through our browser. And I have it up here, but we'll reload it. And we have 3 test failures. And it looks like in our router, all 3 of our rules that are verifying where a message is going are failing. So our rule was missing, and it looks like it was set to no transformation operation. And the same is for rule 2 and rule 3. Let's go up here. And our production test is failing, which is not surprising since it's a full system test. So for the file message, which sends a message to an inbound file service, it looks like it makes it to the file service, but it doesn't get past the router. And for the TCP message, it actually fails even more quickly. It actually doesn't even make it past the service. Looks like we couldn't even send the message to the service. So let's go take a look at our production and see if we can't figure out what that problem is. Oh, and lastly, our settings test failed. And it looks like it expected the configuration item to be enabled, and it was not. It expected 1 but got 0. So that shows me that it looks like our inbound TCP service was not enabled, which would explain the failure that we saw in not being able to send a message over TCP. So let's go look at our production just to verify that. And it is in fact disabled, so let's re-enable that item and apply it. And is now re-enabled. Let's go back to Studio and let's look at our settings test real quick. Now, our settings test verifies various settings for our configuration items. We can verify general settings, which you'll usually see on the left-hand side of a production here. So as you can see, these are our general settings, and we're verifying that it was enabled. And these are specific settings, which you can also assert. So we assert for each one of these configuration items that they're enabled, and we also verify various other settings that we think are important. And if we browse down here to our service, we can see that we expected it to be enabled, but it was not. So that caught that problem. So let's run our tests again and see where we stand now. It looks like our message router test is going. As you can see, our transformation test up there passed, which is good. production test is running. I suspect it probably won't work because our message router is not working properly. And it looks like it's failing in the same spot. It's not making it past the message router. However, for the TCP, it made it through the service but didn't get past the router. But our settings test did pass. So let's go look at our message router test. So for rule 1, it creates an HL7 message with this specification. It then sends a request to the configuration item, which is our message router up here. And then it asserts what route it took. So at first it says it's this routing rule. It's the name of the routing rule for the router. What rule it expected to hit, and what transformation, if any, and what operation it'll go to. And for rule 2 here, it's the same thing. We set up a message, and we assert that it goes to rule 2, and it goes through a transformation, and then it goes to the operation. And rule 3 is a slight variation on that. It asserts that it goes to a different operation, an FTP operation, and there's some small differences between the two messages. One's PV1 admit source is Grand Rapids, the other one is Holland. But these tests are obviously failing, so let's go look at our production and see that the rules are as we expect them to be. Let's view our rules. And it looks like we have absolutely no rules here, which means that I forgot to import the rules for that router. So let's see if we can't import those rules and run the test again. And there's our rule set. Let's compile them when they're imported. Okay, let's run our tests again. Our transformation test passed as we expected. And it looks like our routing tests are passing, which is great. It's going to the transformation and operations as we expect them to. This may solve the production test too. Sometimes it takes a while for the production to stop. And here we're doing our production test, and hopefully this will pass now that we fixed our message router. And it looks like it's making it past the router and going to the operation, which is good. And the same for our TCP services. It's going from our router to the operations. And it looks as if our production test is passing now. And our settings test passed again. So let's go back to our web report. Let's go back up here. And all of our tests are passing, which is good. And that demonstrates the effectiveness of regression testing, and it also shows us that each test serves a purpose and that it leads us to each problem. The settings test showed that our production, our service was not enabled, as we can see over here. And then the message router test led us to know that there was something wrong with our router, and the production test showed overall that something was wrong. So if we look at our production test here, we'll go over one of the tests real quickly. So it's pretty simple. We set up a message that is valid, an HL7 message, and then we send it over TCP to our service on port 435. We pass the message in. We use a nifty helper here that we've created that can send HL7 messages over TCP. We wait for the call interval for that service, and then we assert the trace of the message, essentially where it went into the production. So we expect it to go to the TCP service. From there it should go to the message router, and lastly it should go to the TCP operation. So that was just a small demonstration of what our unit testing framework can do for your productions and the regression testing that it can provide. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope to see you at DevCon 2009.